Hey besties, welcome back to Maggie Stories. What would you do if you found out you're dating the same man with your roommate?
The moment Ibube Okafor threw herself across the living room and wrapped her arms around the man standing in their doorway, CeCe Washington's whole world did something it had never done before. It stopped. Not dramatically. Not with music. Not with slow motion. It just stopped. Like someone had pressed pause on a movie and forgotten to press play again. CeCe stood with one hand still holding the door open, the other gripping a mango juice she just pulled from the fridge, and she watched her roommate, her friend, her person, the girl she'd eaten leftover jollof with at midnight last Thursday, wrap both arms around her boyfriend like he was a long-lost relative who had just stepped off a 14-hour flight. Baby! Oh my God! Why didn't you tell me you were coming? Ibube laughed into his shoulder, her Nigerian accent curving warmly around the words. I was literally just texting you. The mango juice hit the counter with a sound that was a little too loud. Ibube. Cece's voice came out very, very calm. The kind of calm that is not calm at all. The kind of calm that has a basement full of screaming underneath it. Ibube pulled back slightly but kept her hands on his arms. She turned around smiling, and then she saw Cece's face. The smile began its slow departure. CeCe. Why? CeCe said, articulating every word like she was reading a legal document. Are you hugging my boyfriend? The room went quiet. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. Jae-won, because that was his name, Kim Jae-won, 23 years old, heir to the Kim conglomerate, possessor of a jawline that should have been illegal, and apparently a man with the moral compass of a broken compass, stood between them with an expression that was almost impressive in how unbothered it was. He put one hand in his pocket. He looked at CeCe. He looked at Ibube. He tilted his head slightly like a man at a buffet trying to decide between two equally appealing options. Jay, Ibube said slowly, turning to look at him with narrowing eyes. How do you know my roommate? We're dating, CeCe said. Ibube blinked. We're dating, Ibube repeated. They both looked at Jae-won. Jae-won had the audacity, the sheer cosmic audacity, to shrug. One shoulder. Barely. Like this was a minor scheduling conflict. Like he had double-booked a dentist appointment and not two actual human women who had feelings and emotions and perfectly good sense that they had apparently both thrown into the Han River the moment they matched with this man. I should go, he said. You should, CeCe started. But he was already walking out. Unhurried. Completely, infuriatingly calm. He didn't slam the door. He didn't look guilty. He just left. And the door clicked shut behind him with a soft, polite little sound that somehow made it worse. For a very long time, neither of them spoke. Then Ibube said, very quietly, How long? 3 months, CeCe said. Ibube closed her eyes. 3 months. You? 3 months. Here is what you need to understand about CeCe Washington before anything else. She was not a girl who lost her composure. She came from a family in Atlanta whose living room had original artwork on the walls, and whose vacations involved private charters and villas overlooking the sea. She had been raised to be poised, to speak deliberately, to enter rooms like she owned them, which, in several cases, her family technically did. She was petite and polished and had a laugh that could fill a room without trying, and she had chosen to spend her junior year studying international business in Seoul because she wanted the world, not just a portion of it. She had not come to Seoul to be played. Ibube Okafor, on the other hand, was from Lagos, the kind of Lagos that had a gate, a guard, and a generator that didn't skip. Her father ran 3 companies and her mother had a foundation. She was curvy and confident and had the sort of energy that made people instinctively move out of her way. In hallways, not out of fear but out of respect, because she simply moved like someone who had somewhere important to be. She'd come to Seoul because the program was excellent and because she had told her father she wanted to experience a world outside of Lagos and London. And he had kissed her forehead and said go and conquer. She had not come to Seoul to be played either. And yet here they were. They had met on the same dating app, Swipe Soul, which marketed itself as the premier app for international students looking for connections in the city. They had both matched with the same profile. Kim Jae-won, student, loves good food and honest people, looking for something real. The irony of that last part was now searing. The thing was, they had talked about him. Endlessly. They were roommates and best friends and they had sat on the same couch, wrapped in the same kind of cozy late-night energy that only exists between girls who genuinely trust each other, and they had described him to each other in loving, laughing detail. "He's so tall," Cece had said once, curled into the corner of the sofa with a bowl of popcorn. "And he's got this way of looking at you like you're the only thing in the room." "Mine does that too," Ibube had said, throwing a pillow at her. "Maybe the universe is just giving us the same type. He has this jawline. Oh, the jawline. And he barely smiles, but when he does, you feel like you won something." They had collapsed laughing. They had genuinely, completely, beautifully overlooked every single sign because they trusted each other, and they trusted that the universe would not be this cruel, and they trusted that two black girls from money in a foreign city would not be sharing the same lying man like a library book that hadn't been returned. The universe, it turned out, had no such qualms. The first 48 hours after the hug, which is how Cece had already begun to think of it, capital letters and all, were genuinely something to behold. They didn't scream. That would have been too easy. They were both too proud for screaming. Instead, they conducted a masterclass in cold, precise, absolutely devastating roommate warfare. Started small. Cece moved her good olive oil to the back of the cabinet and put a sticky note on it that said Cece's. "Do not touch." She had never put a sticky note on anything in her life. Ibube saw it, peeled it off, put it on her own yogurt, and put a new one that said Ibube's. Also, do not touch. By the end of the day, every surface in the kitchen had a sticky note on it. The blender, the dish rack. One was on the window for reasons that were unclear to both of them. "I cannot believe you went behind my back," Cece said on the second morning, to no one in particular, loudly, while making coffee. "Behind your back?" Ibube replied, also to no one in particular, louder, from behind her bedroom door, which she had opened just to respond and then immediately closed again. "I matched with him before I even knew you existed. I invited him here. I was living here first. By 2 weeks. 2 weeks is still first, Cece." The coffee machine gurgled dramatically, which felt appropriate. They stopped eating together. They stopped watching their shows together, which led to both of them, in their separate rooms, watching the same episode of the same drama on their own laptops at the same time, which neither of them acknowledged. Cece wore her best outfits around the apartment. Not to go anywhere, just to look good. Just to radiate an energy that said, "I am fine and unbothered, and you have not affected me." She came to breakfast in a flowy slate blue midi dress and heels at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, and Ibube looked at her from the couch and said nothing. But she did go to her room and come back in a matching set that made the whole apartment look like a fashion editorial. They were both being absolutely ridiculous, and they both knew it. And neither of them would stop. They dissed each other by omission. The worst kind. Cece stopped saving Ibube's favorite chips at the store. Ibube stopped sending Cece the TikToks she knew she would love. Cece watched 3 episodes of the drama they were supposed to watch together. Ibube ate the last of the banana bread. It was a war of 1,000 tiny paper cuts. And it was exhausting. The worst part, the part neither of them said out loud, was that they missed each other. The apartment was too quiet without Ibube's loud commentary during cooking. The morning felt wrong without Cece's running commentary about everything she read on her phone. They had only been roommates for 4 months, but they had packed a lifetime's worth of friendship into those 4 months, and now the whole place felt like a house where someone had removed all the furniture but left the walls. They were both furious. They were both hurt. And underneath both of those things, they were both deeply, quietly lonely. It was Ibube who broke first. Though she would later claim she didn't break. She simply chose to communicate, which is a very different thing. It was day 6. Cece had been in bed since morning, which was unusual. By afternoon she hadn't come out for water, which was worrying. Ibube stood outside her door for approximately 4 minutes, arms crossed, pride fighting practicality, before she knocked. No answer. She knocked again. "Cece." A small, miserable sound from inside. Ibube pushed the door open. Cece was in bed, still in her sleep clothes, her face flushed and her eyes glassy. The water bottle on her nightstand was empty. She looked up at Ibube and her expression was a complicated thing. Grateful and stubborn and a little bit sorry, all at once. "I think I have a fever," she said, her voice rough. Ibube stared at her. Then she sighed. Deeply, heavily, the sigh of a person who is still angry but is also not an animal. "You couldn't have gotten sick. After I finished being mad at you, she said. Despite herself, despite everything, Cece laughed. It was small and tired, but it was there. Ibube went to the kitchen. She came back with water, 2 paracetamols, and a damp cloth that she put on Cece's forehead without ceremony. Because she was raised right even when she was angry. She sat on the edge of the bed. They were quiet for a moment. He played us both, Cece said finally. Yes, Ibube said. We were so stupid. We were trusting. There's a difference. Ibube paused. Though we probably should have compared notes earlier, Cece groaned. The jawline conversation. I know. The looks at you like you're the only one in the room. We literally described the same man together, and then both went on separate dates with him. They looked at each other. And then they were laughing. Really laughing, the painful, full-body kind that happens when something is so absurd that humor is the only reasonable response. Cece laughed until she coughed and Ibube patted her back, and that made them laugh harder, and for a little while the whole terrible week dissolved into something they could survive. He needs to pay for this, Ibube said when they had settled. Cece wiped her eyes. Her fever-bright gaze sharpened into something that Ibube recognized immediately, because she had the exact same look. Oh, absolutely, Cece said. But we have to do it right. Ibube smiled. It was a slow smile, the kind that takes its time. Tell me everything you know about his routine. The planning took 3 days. Not because they didn't have ideas, they had too many ideas. The problem was narrowing it down to the ones that would land with maximum impact, minimum expulsion risk, and the highest possible entertainment value for the general student population of Yonsei International Campus, which had approximately 800 students and zero shortage of people who had silently wanted to see Kim Jae-won humbled for some time now. Because here was the thing about Jae-won that Cece and Ibube had both slowly, separately, and then jointly come to understand. He was untouchable. Or at least he had always been untouchable, which had given him the posture of a man who genuinely believed consequences were for other people. His family's name was on a building on campus. Not a small building either, the Kim Innovation Center, for floors, glass exterior, named after his grandfather, and featuring a bronze plaque near the entrance that Jae-won had once leaned against for a photo like it was his personal property, which, in a sense, it was. He drove a car that had no business being in a university parking lot. He wore clothes that were not trying to look expensive, they simply were, in the way that things are when money has never been something you had to think about. He walked through campus like the hallways had been built specifically to frame him, and the worst part, the most deeply unfair part, was that he was genuinely beautiful in the way that makes your brain forget to be sensible. Both Cece and Ibube had medical documentation of this effect. In the form of 3 months of voice notes they had sent each other gushing about a man who had been lying to them the entire time. They burned no voice notes. They had, however, started a shared notes document titled Project Humility, with a little crown emoji, which Ibube had added and Cece had immediately changed to a crying laughing face, which Ibube had then changed back to the crown with the note. We are queens doing queen things, let the crown stay. The crown stayed. Phase 1, the floor. It was Ibube's idea. She had been eating a banana at breakfast, peeled it, looked at the peel, looked at Cece and said nothing for exactly 4 seconds. Cece had looked up from her phone. No, I haven't said anything. You have the face. What face? The face you get when you're about to say something I'm going to agree with against my better judgment. Ibube held up the banana peel. Cece stared at it. That's Ibube, that's a cartoon. That's what happens in cartoons. Cartoons are based on real physics. That is not true. Name one cartoon law that doesn't have a basis in. Ibube. He takes the same path every Tuesday and Thursday morning, Ibube said, setting the peel down on the table with the gravity of a woman presenting evidence. From the parking lot, through the East Corridor, past the vending machines, to his 9 o'clock lecture. The floor in that corridor is polished marble. I have personally almost slipped there twice in flats. Cece looked at the banana peel. She looked at Ibube. She looked back at the peel. How many bananas do we have? They bought 6. They used 2 placed strategically, slightly overlapping, right in the narrowest point of the East Corridor where the floor caught the morning light and looked the most beautiful and therefore the most dangerous. Cece had sourced information about Jae-won's Tuesday schedule through a mutual acquaintance in his business class. Not through spying, she maintained, through research, and they had timed it perfectly. They were not present for the fall. They were around the corner, ostensibly looking at the notice board, ostensibly reading the flyer about the upcoming campus film night, absolutely not hiding. They heard it before they saw it. First, there was a sound like a very expensive shoe meeting a very slippery surface and losing the argument. Then there was the particular silence that precedes a fall, that half-second of suspended disbelief. Then there was a crash that was honestly much louder than either of them had anticipated, followed immediately by the sound of at least 30 students in the corridor reacting with the collective energy of people who had been waiting for this moment without knowing they were waiting for it. The laughter started slowly. Then it built. Then it became the kind of campus-wide laughter that gets whispered about in group chats for the rest of the semester. Cece and Ibube turned the corner just as J1 was getting up from the floor, and the sight was genuinely something to behold. His jacket had done him absolutely no favors. His composure, usually impenetrable, usually sculpted, was sitting somewhere near the vending machines where it had apparently rolled after impact. His eyes were doing something they had very rarely done in public. They were wide open. "Oh my goodness," Ibube said very loudly, from across the corridor, pressing a hand to her mouth. "Are you okay?" Cece had both hands clasped in front of her and was biting the inside of her cheek with the discipline of an Olympic athlete. That looked painful. Around them, people were whispering, pointing phones, nudging each other. Someone near the back had already started recording. Within 40 minutes, the video would be in 6 different group chats. Within 2 hours, it would have 300 views. Within 24 hours, it would be the most watched piece of content in the campus community's history, set to a dramatic orchestral remix that someone had added for no reason except that it was perfect. J1 looked at them. His expression cycled through embarrassment, anger, suspicion, and then settled on a cold fury that he wrapped around himself like an expensive coat. He pointed at the ceiling cameras. "This corridor will be reviewed," he said, and his voice was terrifyingly controlled. "I will find out what happened, and I will take it up with the administration." "My family, your family," Ibube said pleasantly, blinking at him with her large, serene eyes, "should really look into better shoe soles. Just a thought." She and Cece walked away at a perfectly normal, unhurried pace. They turned the corner. They made it approximately 12 steps before Cece grabbed Ibube's arm, and they both folded against the wall laughing so hard that Cece's eyes watered and Ibube had to crouch down because her knees stopped working. "The sound," Cece wheezed. "His face. When his foot went. I thought he was going to cry right there." "Phase 1, Ibube gasped, standing back up and straightening her blazer, "is a success. Phase 2, the water. This one required more logistics." J1 had a very specific campus hydration routine, which sounds like an absurd thing to know about a person but which became relevant information when you were conducting a structured campaign of inconvenience. He had a stainless steel water bottle, matte black, branded minimalist, cost more than some people's textbooks, that he refilled at the filtered water station outside the student lounge every day between 11 and 11:15. He usually left it on the table while he talked to people. He was a social creature when it suited him, which it often did, because being handsome and wealthy in a campus environment comes with a social life that requires very little maintenance. The thing about salt water is that it smells like nothing. It looks like nothing. It is, to all visual and olfactory inspection, entirely indistinguishable from regular water until the moment it is inside your mouth and it is too late. Cece had proposed the salt. Ibube had proposed the volume. They had done a test on a glass of water in their kitchen and agreed that the ratio was correct. Noticeable enough to be genuinely shocking, not enough to cause any real harm, just enough to make a man sputter publicly in front of his social circle. They took turns. Cece was the distraction. She walked past the student lounge at 11:10, spotted a boy she vaguely knew from her economics class, and started a conversation loud enough and animated enough to hold the general attention of the space. Ibube came in from the other side, calm as a Sunday, reached the table, added 2 full sachets of salt to J1's matte black bottle, shook it twice, set it back exactly as it was, and walked out. The whole operation took 11 seconds. They found out what happened through 4 different sources, all of whom had been present. J1 had come back to the table mid-conversation with 2 friends, picked up his bottle the way people pick up water bottles. automatically, without thought, and taken a very large sip the way people take sips when they are thirsty and not expecting any complications. According to their source, his face had done something extraordinary. He hadn't spit it out immediately. He had, in the way of someone who was too proud to have a public reaction, held it in for a moment while his expression cycled through confusion, realization, and then a deeply unpleasant understanding. He had then turned and spit it very deliberately into the nearest trash can, wiped his mouth, and put the bottle down with controlled precision while his two friends looked at him with the expressions of people desperately trying not to laugh. "What's wrong?" one of them had asked. Jae-won had said very calmly, "Something is wrong with the water station. I'll have it reported." He had not reported the water station. He had reported nothing. He had no proof of anything. But he had also started looking over his shoulder, which was exactly the intended effect. Phase 3. The presentation. This one was Sesay's masterpiece, and she would accept full credit. Thank you. Jae-won was in her international marketing lecture. She had not arranged this. It was simply one of the universe's more pointed jokes. He sat 3 rows ahead of her, which meant she spent 50 minutes per session looking at the back of the head of a man who had dated her and her roommate simultaneously for a quarter of a year. It was during a group presentation week. The professor, Dr. Han, had assigned random groups through a lottery system. Through what Cece would later describe as divine timing and what Ibube would describe as Cece cheating by switching her lottery number with someone else. The truth being somewhere in the middle, Cece ended up in Jae-won's presentation group. She had 4 days to prepare. The presentation was on brand identity in international markets. Cece had done hers on the concept of reputation management, how a brand that has been caught in deceptive practices must navigate public trust, what the research says about consumer recovery, and what happens to a brand's equity when it is caught presenting itself as exclusive and honest while simultaneously serving multiple markets with the same product under different names. She used no personal examples. She used only real case studies from real companies. She was thorough and professional, and her slides were beautiful. She spoke with the composed, elegant authority of someone who had been raised to command rooms. She made eye contact with Jae-won exactly twice during the presentation. Both times she smiled. The smile was the academic, courteous kind. The kind that says, "I am not talking about you," while every single word is about you. Ibube was not in this class. Ibube had asked 3 people to go in and observe from the back as an academic exercise, and had been receiving a live text commentary from all 3 simultaneously. He shifted in his seat at the multiple markets, same product, slide, first correspondent. He looked at his phone and then back at her and then back at his phone again, second. Someone in the class is looking between her and him like they're watching a tennis match, and I think they know, third. Cece got full marks on the presentation. Dr. Han called it remarkably precise. Jae-won got a solid grade 2 because he was genuinely not unintelligent, which was the most annoying thing about him. But for the rest of the day, a very particular silence followed him around campus. The silence of people who had watched that presentation and done the math. Phase 4, 5, and 6. A brief summary. Phase 4 involved Ibube submitting an anonymous review to the campus dining social page raving about a new dish she claimed was exactly what Jae-won recommended to her personally. A dish that was, in fact, the one cafeteria option that was famously polarizing, involving a combination of flavors that had driven a minor civil war in the campus review forums. 14 people tried it based on the post. Jae-won received approximately 11 messages asking him about the recommendation. He understood none of them. Phase 5 was simpler but had a longer reach. They had both saved every single photo he had ever sent them, every voice note, every good morning text, every thinking of you message. They compiled them into a single folder. They showed the folder to exactly one person, a mutual contact who was known to be discreet but who had a face that could not conceal information. Within days, the student body had developed a collective, wordless awareness of what Jae-won had been doing, the way communities develop collective awareness about things. Not through announcement but through the slow accumulation of knowing looks and quiet conversations and the particular body language of people who have updated their opinion of someone. Phase 6 was the banana peel again. Different corridor. Just in case he thought the first one was a coincidence. He felt differently the second time, more alert, so he caught himself on a wall and only stumbled rather than going fully down. But the students nearby had seen it. The look on his face. The wild-eyed, spinning, who is responsible for this look, was, according to Ibub's field correspondent, even better than the first. He's starting to understand, Cece said. On the evening of Phase 6, sitting on the kitchen counter eating crackers with Ibub beside her, feet dangling, their shared notes document open between them on a tablet. Good, Ibub said. Understanding is the beginning of consequence. That's very wise. I read it on a mug. Cece pointed at the next item on the list. Phase 7. The public one. You think he'll do it? Cece asked. Ibub picked up a cracker. Oh, she said. He has no choice. The moment. It happened in the main quad. Not because they had engineered it to happen there specifically, but because the main quad on a Wednesday afternoon was where everyone was always the way water collects in the lowest point of a surface. The campus community was there. The benches were full. The outdoor tables were occupied. The energy was midweek and warm and entirely unprepared for what was about to happen. J1 had been pushed to his limit. He had slipped twice. He had drunk salt water. He had received 11 mysterious cafeteria messages. He had sat through a presentation that he was 60% sure had been about him and 0% able to prove it. He had lost his campus social footing in a way that had happened slowly and then all at once, and he was now standing in the middle of the quad with the expression of a man who has been holding a very heavy thing and has finally decided to put it down. He called them both, not separately, together. He found them, which was easy because they were at their usual outdoor table and had been there for 40 minutes. And he stood in front of them and he said, loudly enough that the tables nearby fell quiet, I owe you both an apology. Cece looked up from her book. Ibub looked up from her laptop. They looked at each other. They looked back at him. Go on, Cece said. He exhaled. Whatever this was costing him was visible on his face, which was the first honest thing Cece had seen there in months. I was wrong, he said. What I did was wrong. I treated you both like you didn't matter and I was selfish and... He paused like the next word was being pulled out of him by force. I'm sorry. The quad was very quiet. Ibub studied him for a long moment. She had the expression of a woman giving an assessment. That's a start, she said. A start? He repeated. You apologized, Cece said pleasantly. You didn't explain. You didn't take responsibility. You said I was wrong and I was selfish, and both of those are true, but they're also very vague. Try again. He looked at her, then at Ibub. You are both, he started. Careful, Ibub said. He closed his mouth. He tried again. This time it was slower and more specific and involved actual sentences about what he had done and why it was wrong. And the quad listened. And by the end of it, there was a sound from the surrounding tables that was not applause exactly but was something close. The murmur of 200 people deciding something about a person. Cece and Ibub accepted the apology with grace and with a look between them that said phase complete. The call came on a Thursday. J1 was in his apartment, a private, fully furnished place off campus that his parents paid for without discussion, the way they paid for most things in his life, which was quietly and completely and without requiring him to think about money even once. When his phone lit up with a contact name that made his stomach do something it had not done since he was approximately 14 years old. Father. Not Dad. Not Appa in the warm, familiar way. The contact was saved as father because that was the nature of the relationship, respectful, structured, and currently terrifying. He let it ring twice, which was one ring longer than he should have, and then he answered. J1. His father's voice was the temperature of a boardroom in January. Yes, sir. I received a call today. A pause. From Chairman O, whose daughter attends your university, who told him about a video. Another pause. Of you. On the floor. J1 closed his eyes. And then, his father continued, with the measured pace of a man who had spent 30 years in business negotiations and knew that silence was a weapon. I spoke to your mother, who had received a separate message from Mrs. Park, whose son also attends your university, who mentioned something about a presentation that several people found very pointed. And water. And an apology in the middle of the quad that is apparently circulating as a campus story. Father. I am not finished. J1 was not finished either, in the sense that he had more to say. But he understood clearly that this was not a conversation where that was relevant. I want to understand something, his father said. The Kim name is on a building at that university. Your grandfather's name. And you have been using your time there to play games with young women and embarrass yourself publicly in corridors. Another pause. The longest one yet. Is that a correct summary? There was genuinely no good answer to that question. Yes, sir. The silence that followed had a weight to it. You will come home this weekend, his father said. You will sit with your mother and me and you will explain yourself fully. In the meantime, your accounts have been adjusted. The car will be returned. You have your tuition and your housing and your food allowance and nothing else until we have spoken and until I see evidence that you understand what it means to carry a name. The line went quiet for a moment. Then his father said, and this was somehow the part that landed hardest. Your grandfather built something. I built something. We did not do that so that you could be the boy who falls on banana peels in hallways because two young women decided you needed to be taught a lesson. A breath. They were right, by the way. The call ended. Jaewon sat on his very expensive couch in his very quiet apartment and stared at the wall for a long time. The news reached Cece and Ibyub the way most news reached them, through the ambient intelligence of campus life, which was faster and more thorough than any formal communication system. By Friday morning they knew about the car. By Friday afternoon they knew about the accounts. By Friday evening they had received 3 separate messages from 3 separate people telling them that Jaewon had been seen at the campus convenience store, standing at the checkout, looking at his phone with an expression of profound confusion, apparently attempting to calculate whether he had enough on his adjusted allowance for both ramen and the face wash he needed. Ibyub read the last message, set her phone down and said, "He's buying drugstore face wash." Cece looked up. The man who owned 3 different serums? Apparently. A beat. I feel, Cece said carefully, a very small amount of sympathy. I feel 0, Ibyub said. But I respect the journey. They ate their dinner. They had cooked together. A full production, as their dinners had become again, involving Ibyub commandeering the stove with the authority of someone who grew up watching serious cooking happen in a serious kitchen, and Cece handling the sides with the focused energy of someone who was not going to be shown up in her own home. The result was extraordinary, as it usually was, and they sat across from each other and ate and talked, and it felt like breathing after holding your breath for a long time. This was the thing about Cece and Ibyub that no boy, not even one with that jawline, could ultimately touch. They were good together. Not just compatible roommates good. Not just politely coexisting good. Genuinely, foundationally good, the kind of friendship that forms fast and sets like concrete, built on the specific chemistry of 2 women who were different in almost every surface way but identical in the ways that mattered. Cece was precise where Ibyub was instinctive. Ibyub was loud where Cece was deliberate. Cece planned 3 steps ahead. Ibyub trusted her gut and was right more often than probability allowed. Cece could talk her way into or out of almost any situation with a combination of composure and eloquence. Ibyub could walk into a room and within 4 minutes have assessed every person in it, understood the social dynamics, and identified exactly what needed to be said and to whom. Together they were, as Ibyub had once described them during a late-night conversation that had gone deeply philosophical, a complete operating system. Cece had said that was the nerdiest thing she had ever heard. Ibyub had said Cece was just mad she hadn't thought of it first. Cece had been quiet for 2 seconds and then said, "The analogy works though." Jaewon came back from his weekend home a different weight. Not broken, he wasn't the breaking type, and in truth that wasn't what anyone needed from him. But different. The specific ease of a person who has never faced a consequence had shifted into something more careful, more considered. He walked through campus the following week with his hands in his pockets and his eyes down in a way that was not defeated but was something like aware. He saw Cece in the library on Tuesday. He stopped. She looked up from her laptop and looked at him with the calm, level gaze of a woman who has processed something and filed it correctly. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said. "I meant what I said. In the quad." She studied him for a moment. "I know," she said. "That's why we accepted it." He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more. She waited. "The presentation," he said. "The marketing one." "Yes. It was about me." She tilted her head. "It was about brand identity in international markets," she said. "Dr. Han gave me full marks." The corner of his mouth moved. It wasn't a full smile. It was the very beginning of something that might, over time and with significant personal development, become a smile. "You're both terrifying," he said. "Thank you," said Cece warmly. He left. She went back to her work. And that, in the most important sense, was the end of it. But here is what happened after the end of it, which is the part that matters most. J1, deprived of the frictionless life that had made accountability impossible, began to do something that looked, from the outside, almost like growth. He started showing up to his group projects before the meeting started, which his group members found unsettling for approximately 1 week and then appreciated. He stopped treating the campus service staff as furniture. He had a conversation with his father, a real one, the kind where both people said things they meant, and emerged from it with a revised understanding of what his family's name was supposed to mean as opposed to what he had been using it for. He did not become a saint. He was still handsome and still wealthy and still had moments of the old arrogance that surfaced like muscle memory. But he was working on it. You could tell because working on something. Looks specific. It looks like catching yourself, pausing, choosing differently. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up quietly in the small choices. The campus noticed. Campus always noticed. Someone in his friend group mentioned to a mutual acquaintance of Cece's that J1 had said, in a private conversation, that getting outsmarted by 2 women who were smarter and funnier and more coordinated than anyone had given them credit for was the most educational thing that happened to me this year. Possibly ever. Cece heard this and said nothing. Then she texted Ibube. He called us coordinated. Ibube responded in 4 seconds. We are coordinated. Also, did he say smarter? Apparently. Growth. Minimal. But present. Like a houseplant. Cece. I'm just saying. We water it from a distance and eventually, we are not watering him. He's not our plant. I'm speaking metaphorically. Your metaphors keep getting us in trouble. One time. One very significant time. The conversation devolved from there into a 40-message thread about metaphors, accountability, and whether personal growth could be accurately compared to horticulture, which was exactly the kind of conversation that made their friendship what it was. The last Friday of the month, they had a tradition now. It had started without being declared, the way the best traditions do. Sometime in the weeks after the reconciliation, after the campaign, after everything had settled into its new shape, they had started cooking big on Fridays. Not just eating together, cooking properly, with music playing and both of them in the kitchen and the kind of organized chaos that happens when 2 people know each other's rhythms well enough to move around each other without collision. This particular Friday, Cece was at the counter making a sauce that required her full attention and approximately 4 separate spices she had sourced from a specialty market 2 metro stops away. Because she was not doing anything halfway. She was in a long burgundy skirt and an off-shoulder top in soft caramel, and she looked like she was running a cooking show nobody was filming. Ibube was managing 3 things at once on the stove with the energy of someone who finds multitasking relaxing, which Cece had decided was either a gift or a personality disorder. She had on a structured emerald green, no, wait. She was in a deep plum wrap coat she'd thrown on over her outfit and she looked, as she usually looked, like someone who had gotten dressed specifically to win. Okay, Ibube said, stirring without looking up. Real talk. When is it ever fake talk with you? Do you think he actually likes someone now? Like legitimately? Someone in his business class was making eyes. I don't know and I don't monitor him. You know everything that happens on this campus. Through passive absorption. Cece. Pause. I heard a rumor, Cece said with great reluctance, about a girl in his urban planning elective. But it's a rumor and I have not confirmed it and I am choosing not to have feelings about it. Ibube turned around. Are you sure you're choosing that? Cece stirred her sauce. Yes. Ibube watched her. Mostly, Cece said. Ibube pointed the spoon at her. If you still have feelings. I do not have feelings. I have residual awareness of a person I spent 3 months emotionally invested in, which is different. It is not different. It is categorically different, Ibube. You literally know the name of the girl in his elective. I heard it passively. Cece. The sauce bubbled. Cece sighed. She put the spoon down and turned around and looked at her roommate. Her best friend. Her partner in the most absurd and glorious chapter of her soul experience. The person who had gotten sick at the exact right moment and started a conversation that had put everything back together. I'm fine, she said. And then, more honestly, I will be fine. Ibube nodded slowly. Then she opened her arms. Cece crossed the kitchen and they hugged, briefly and firmly, the way women hug when they are not performing comfort but actually providing it. We are never, Ibube said into her shoulder. Downloading that app again. Agreed. We find our own people. Organically. In the wild. In the wild, Cece confirmed. They pulled apart. Ibube picked her spoon back up. Cece went back to her sauce. The wild might include the architecture department mixer next week, Ibube said, casually. I heard the graduate students are attending. Cece looked at her sideways. You heard this passively? Through ambient campus awareness. You are quoting me. You said it first. Cece laughed. It filled the kitchen the way her laugh always did, warm and wide and completely uncontained. Fine, she said. We go. We go, Ibube agreed, looking incredible. Naturally. And we walk in like we own it. We always walk in like we own it. Ibube smiled. That's why I like you. The music from the speaker shifted into something with a good beat, and without discussion or negotiation they both started moving slightly. The small instinctive dancing that happens when a song is right and the company is right and the moment is simply purely good. Outside, Soul was doing what Soul did in the evening. Lit and layered and completely indifferent to the small human dramas happening in its apartments and corridors and quads. Somewhere across the city, J1 was probably studying or growing, or doing whatever it is people do when they have been confronted with the limits of their own behavior and decided to do better. Good for him. In the kitchen of their apartment, Cece and Ibube cooked their Friday dinner and talked over each other and disagreed about spice levels and agreed about everything that mattered, and the whole evening felt like something worth keeping.
Hello besties, in this story we learned that the right friendship survives the wrong man. When everything falls apart and the dust settles, look beside you. The person still standing there, the one who stayed through the anger, the silence, the ugly crying, and the petty sticky notes, that is your real relationship. Guard it with everything you have, everything else is temporary. Besties, always protect the friendship, everything else is a lesson. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.